You blinked. Hi, it's me, Julian, from the internet. Elden Ring is a game that exists. You know what else is a game that exists? Wow, this video was written, if you can believe it. Breath of the Wild. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild changed everything by being the first video game to ask the question, what if open world games were, fun? I never really played open world games growing up because it was never really a common genre on any of the consoles that I owned. So when I was able to trick someone into being my friend so that I could play Just Cause 2 on their Xbox 360, I was kind of blown away. I never realized that a video game world could be so, unrestricted. After getting that initial taste of that kind of design, I was convinced that this was the future of video games. Go anywhere, do anything. In a medium built specifically for interactivity, this felt like the logical conclusion, right? It was easy for me to imagine this perfect video game, this paragon of freedom. See that mountain? You can climb it.
That mountain is not just a backdrop. You can walk all the way to the top of that mountain.
Apparently, the AAA gaming industry agreed with me, because come the 8th generation of consoles, every video game was open world. And you know what? It was boring.
It turns out that when you make a video game this huge, a lot of corners have to be cut. So these game worlds usually ended up existing as a sort of hub for the more designed aspects of the game. Levels and missions and such, with a laundry list of nearly identical chores and errands to do on the way if that's what you're into. Do you like following lines? Do you like clearing bandit camps?
How about 10,000 bandit camps? I'm generalizing, of course, and a lot of these games can actually be pretty fun, but that's only ever in spite of their openness. There are, of course, exceptions to this rule, and while none of these games have ever really grabbed my attention for more than a few hours total, I know a lot of people really like your Grand Theft Fallouts and your Red Dead Witcher Scrolls.
These games are a bit more thoroughly designed, with a greater attention to detail and more meaningful things to do, but I personally find that they still follow that same kinda boring formula of go to the place marked on the map and do the thing, even if the sandbox of the world in between gives you more to work with than your typical Ubisoft game.
Enter Breath of the Wild. Now, I'm not going to pretend like this game broke a whole lot of new ground, because I think the interesting thing this game does is build off of existing tropes and ideas in ways that engage the player a lot more. Take, for example, the towers.
In your typical Ubisoft game, you're given dozens of towers to climb, and when you get to the top, the game barfs out a bunch of icons onto the map.
Wow, look at all those bandit camps!
Breath of the Wild also has towers, but instead of littering your map with a bunch of ugly icons, the game saves the map itself as a reward for climbing the tower, meaning that the map of the area you're in is withheld from you until you find and climb one of the game's many towers, and once you do so, you're rewarded with not only a great view of the landscape, but also a detailed map of its topography. The points of interest aren't little icons, they're just things that look interesting to you. This results in exploration that feels a lot more organic because it's motivated by the player. The world itself is also interactive to a degree that you see more often in survival games than your standard AAA open world game. There's a weather system that affects how you play. Rain makes surfaces slippery. Metal weapons and items attract lightning. There are areas that are too hot or too cold. Wind affects how you glide. Grass can be set on fire, creating an updraft. What's updraft? Not much. What's up with you? Jesus Christ. I'm so funny. Trees can be chopped down, and all of these systems interact in intuitive and sometimes surprising ways, and they can all be used against you or to your advantage. Sure, this game has stories that were written by the developers, but the stories that you'll remember the most from playing this game are the ones that you created yourself by interacting with and exploring the detailed world of Hyrule. And because there are no preset map markers, the world is designed to be fun to explore.
Contrast this with an open world game that I've been chipping away at lately, Horizon Zero Dawn, which, while generally pretty fun and pretty well made, has an open world that feels more like very pretty filler between point A and point B. And yes, those points are bandit camps. Don't get me wrong, you can explore and it can be fun, but it never really feels like the world is designed for you to play it this way. Horizon Zero Dawn drops you into the world and says, go to these places. These are the places that I want you to go. Breath of the Wild drops you into the world and says, go explore, have fun. Hi there, 4 a.m. editing Julian here. I'm realizing that in this part of the video it sounds like I'm being pretty mean to Horizon Zero Dawn. It's a good game, I enjoy the game, and it is fun to explore in the game. I just think that Breath of the Wild incentivizes exploration a lot more than Horizon Zero Dawn does.
Hi there, 5 a.m. editing Julian here. God, you look like shit. Get some sleep, dude. What are you doing, man? Come on.
So by now you can probably understand why I put over 100 hours into Breath of the Wild, where most open world games don't grab my attention for more than a dozen or so. And I'm sorry, I know this is all kind of old hat if you watch these kind of videos already. There's no shortage of video essays about what Breath of the Wild does that sets it apart from other open world games. But look, my parents watch my YouTube videos, so I'm just trying to bring them up to speed. And also, I want you to understand where I'm coming from, because I'm about to tear this game apart.
Twilight Princess had 9 dungeons. Skyward Sword had 7. Breath of the Wild, the biggest and most ambitious Zelda game ever made, has 1. That's objectively bad game design.
Okay, it has one dungeon that I would consider to be a real meaty Zelda dungeon, with a cool theme and a well-designed interior space for you to explore, and that's Hyrule Castle. The game does also have 4 divine beasts, these giant mechanical creatures that you explore the insides of. These things are pretty fun. They have some good puzzles that force you to think about the layout and structure of the level as a whole, and they're clearly meant to be this game's answer to the traditional Zelda dungeon. Now, it's not like there's no precedent for a small number of dungeons in a Zelda game. Majora's Mask only had 4 dungeons, and Wind Waker, if you were being uncharitable, had 5. But these dungeons were all pretty distinct from each other, visually, mechanically, and thematically. The divine beasts are kinda samey. I've been showing you footage from all 4, but I wouldn't forgive you for thinking this is all the same location. And there's also just not a whole lot to them. It generally took me no longer than half an hour or so to beat these things. And these things are kinda in the back of your head the entire game. You never stumble upon them organically. From very early in the game, you know exactly where they are. And each one has a bit of a story quest attached to it, so you're never gonna find one by accident. Breath of the Wild also has 120 optional shrines for you to find. These are kinda like mini dungeons with small self-contained puzzles and combat challenges. A lot of these are well hidden and can sometimes be pretty fun, but they have the same issue of looking and feeling pretty samey. And since the whole world is open to you to explore however you want, these shrines and the divine beasts are designed to be completed in any order, which sounds nice, but results in no real escalation of difficulty. For the most part, these challenges are all equally difficult.
Now, you might be wondering why I'm talking so much about linear dungeons in a video about open worlds. And yeah, you're right. I don't know why I'm doing that. That's weird, huh? Yeah, let's just cut all that out. Elden Ring has an answer to pretty much every one of these issues. Now, at the risk of shattering my credibility, at the time of writing this, I've only put about 20 hours into the game. However, based on the quality of what I've played so far and what I've heard from people who have played more of the game, I'm pretty sure that this point it will be good and it'll make good sense for a YouTube video about video games. Yeah.
Like Breath of the Wild, Elden Ring is very open, with plenty of dungeons and challenges available for you to take on in any order. However, unlike Breath of the Wild, a lot of these challenges will be way too difficult for you if you're in the early game. You're welcome to try them, and if you're skilled enough, you'll be able to get through them with a lot of patience. Like a lot of patience. But they're very clearly meant for people who have played the game a bit longer. And Breath of the Wild does have some of this stuff too, but it's just not nearly as common. This kind of thing adds texture to the world and creates some very memorable situations that the player might find themselves in. For example, I could have gone straight to the first main dungeon of the game. Instead, I found a way around it and explored a bit further. I found myself in this swamp with all these high-level enemies that I was not prepared to fight, and it was honestly exhilarating, dodging every attack and running away from everything chasing me just so that I could further explore this new area. It felt like I was doing something I wasn't supposed to, and that's really cool. Good job, FromSoft. Maybe pay your employees more.
Elden Ring also has 1 million optional dungeons, give or take, and you never know when you're gonna stumble on one because they're in the most unassuming places. They are not signposted at all. This is a confident game that knows that it has a lot of really good content and trusts a player well enough to find that content on their own.
You end up finding yourself poking at every every corner of the map, just in case there's some elaborate cave or hidden elevator that leads to, holy shit, that's just sitting there, waiting for you to find it. That's really cool.
And that's the kind of shit that I'm talking about that Breath of the Wild just doesn't have.
If you find a glowing orange shrine, you know more or less what's gonna be inside of it. You find a random hole in the wall in Elden Ring, you have no idea what's waiting for you inside. Even once you start to recognize the formula, it's different enough every time that it remains fresh and exciting. New enemies, new bosses, new mechanics that you've never seen before. By contrast, the shrines and even the divine beasts in Breath of the Wild feel like they were all designed using the same handful of ingredients. They're generally pretty creative and fun, but once you've played a dozen of them or so, you start to wish they were a bit more unique.
You have now reached the end of the dungeon section of this video, so sorry to all you dungeon heads out there, but we are moving on. We are moving to the next subject. This train doesn't stop. It just keeps on going. Through video game town. This is a placeholder segue that'll be edited out. Elden Ring's world design is what those in the industry like to call very good.
Like in Breath of the Wild and a lot of other good games, various landmarks placed around the world are designed to look interesting from a distance in order to catch the player's eye and draw them in. Disneyland, an amusement park owned by a homophobic oligopoly, famously utilizes this in landmarks like Cinderella's castle. Walt Disney called this type of landmark a weenie. Just like Death Mountain is almost always looming over you in Breath of the Wild, the Erd Tree is this constantly glowing beacon in the distance, a reminder of your place in this world and story.
These are weenies, and big ones too, but that doesn't mean that there's no shortage of smaller weenies in these games.
Look around in Elden Ring or Breath of the Wild and you'll see plenty of intriguing weenies that you'll want to explore, and even if you don't visit them right away, the image of the weenie lingers in your subconscious.
And until you finally pursue the weenie, you'll constantly be thinking about the weenie, captivated by the weenie, and you won't be satisfied until you fully experience every last weenie you see. That's good game design. So I think Elden Ring takes a lot of its cues from Breath of the Wild, but it also does some interesting things that set it apart from Zelda in a few notable ways. While Breath of the Wild confidently flaunts its weenies out in the open, Elden Ring can be a little bit more shy.
As you play the game, you'll find many new areas and landmarks that you didn't even know existed because a lot of them are totally hidden from view. In Zelda, many of the major parts of the landscape are visible to you from the beginning of the game. In that iconic moment when Link runs out of the Shrine of Resurrection for the first time, you can see a pretty sizable chunk of Hyrule, and you're probably already planning in your head where you want to go first.
Elden Ring has a similar moment, but it pulls a trick on you that I think is neat.
When I first walked out into Limgrave, I was conditioned by Breath of the Wild to think that I was seeing out into the edge of the world. The game even subtly reinforces this idea by giving you only a small piece of the map without telling you there's more. But once you start to explore, the rug gets pulled out from under you over and over again as you repeatedly find out that there is more to this world than you thought. I've had several oh shit moments playing this game where I discover a new unique location that's bigger than any area I'd been to so far. The game gets exponentially larger and more varied the more you explore it, and that creates a really cool sense of mystery and discovery that not a lot of other games have.
Here's a fun gamer fact. My phone stopped recording video yesterday. It's the next day now. I probably look a little different. We're gonna move past it. I know this approach of hiding huge important parts of the world from view might sound like the opposite of how I described Breath of the Wild's philosophy to be, but it's not necessarily.
Because even though a lot of interesting content is hidden from you, you're never far away from a visible landmark. Like in Zelda, Elden Ring's open world is designed so that no matter where you are, there will always be something new in the distance that catches your eye. This allows the developers to create a sort of trail of breadcrumbs that leads you to new areas that you wouldn't have been able to find otherwise.
Another thing that sets Elden Ring apart from Zelda is its combat. It's difficult. It's really hard. It's basically the Dark Souls of video games.
It's got all the staples of every From Software combat system. You can't really get away with mashing the attack button in these types of games. You have to tactically assess every situation you're in, learn to read and memorize your enemy's movements, and die. A fair amount. I'm oversimplifying, of course, and there are a plethora of different ways you can approach any given situation with all sorts of different types of weapons and attacks and ways you can customize your gear and respec your character.
It's an RPG. It's got numbers. Oh boy, does it got numbers. Some people are really into this style of combat. I have trouble with it.
Don't get me wrong, it's basically the most refined it's ever been as far as I can tell, and there are a lot of ways in which this brutal design adds to the experience. Forcing the player to adapt to this kind of challenge adds a sort of gritty realism to the experience, that you really are up against some pretty tremendous odds. It gives you the feeling that this fantasy world is real and dangerous.
There's a dissonance in a lot of games like Zelda, where when you take down a really big enemy, for example, you kind of have to create this story in your head that, wow, Link just accomplished this impossible feat, when in reality, it was probably kind of easy.
And even when it's not, it still kind of feels like you're being told this narrative and not actually living it. Don't get me wrong, there's definitely value to this kind of power fantasy that these games provide. Zelda bosses can be very fun. Elden Ring and games like it don't hand you that fantasy, they make you earn it. And so when the game makes you fight a really big monster, it feels like this is an actual monster that thinks a certain way and fights a certain way. And you are inhabiting a human body with specific limitations and strengths. And when you eventually defeat that monster, it feels like your own accomplishment, and not one that the developers let you have.
I think Zelda could learn a lot from Elden Ring's combat, but I don't think it should copy it.
As it is in Breath of the Wild, the melee is pretty bog standard. Ocarina of Time set the template for 3D lock-on combat, and to be honest, it's barely evolved since then. In Breath of the Wild, you just attack and block and dodge, and if you time that right, you get this kind of poorly thought out slow-mo thing. It's fine, it's all very serviceable and has good game feel, but Elden Ring's melee combat has so many more options and forces you to be so much more deliberate and thoughtful. I think Zelda could learn a little from that. Earlier in the series, Wind Waker and Twilight Princess added a little bit more depth by giving you more moves, but this always felt superficial to me, especially since they were never necessary. Skyward Sword is kind of an outlier, since it did add one-to-one motion-controlled sword fighting, which was nice for that game. It made each fight a bit more thoughtful, but I don't consider it an evolution of this style so much as it is a spin-off of it. I actually think that From Software's Demon's Souls is a lot more of an evolution of the Zelda combat system, making each encounter feel like it matters. That said, it's very difficult, and not to open a whole can of worms, not the most accessible. The Zelda games can be hard, and there are even times in Breath of the Wild that you'll get surprised by the difficulty, and I do think that's when its combat is at its most engaging, but it's never Elden Ring difficult, and I do think that's for the best.
Zelda's always been a very accessible game. It's a friendly game, I don't know how else to put it. Sure, it can be scary or intense sometimes, but it's a welcoming game. It doesn't push you away, it invites you in with open arms and visible weenies. Zelda doesn't need to be incredibly difficult, but it could take cues from Elden Ring by diversifying its melee combat and making it just a little bit more thoughtful.
To be fair, Breath of the Wild does have other ways of approaching its combat. I think simplifying this game's combat to just its melee stuff is reductive.
Because if you see a bunch of little goblins having themselves a little goblin party, you can mercilessly slaughter them all in any way you choose.
Throw a bomb, or a square bomb, or a big rock, or an arrow, or be sneaky, or be crafty, or extra. There are so many ways in which the systems of this game interact with each other that you have a lot of really fun options in most of the combat encounters in the game. Walking up to guys and whacking them with your sword is probably the least interesting way to fight stuff.
Elden Ring gives you options too, but they're a bit less intuitive. It's the RPG stuff. And like, I'm not gonna fault an RPG for being an RPG, but if you'll allow me to get just a little bit more subjective here, and I'm assuming you will since this moment has already happened and you don't have a time machine. It sucks. It sucks.
Anytime I have to level up my little mega mind, I stress myself out worrying that I'm gonna fuck up the stats somehow and I get choice paralysis. But I can appreciate what this type of stuff brings to the table, the depth that it adds, and despite it never really clicking with me, I can see all the ways in which it makes your character feel realistic and uniquely yours. I guess what I'm saying is that RPG mechanics don't absolutely need to be in open worlds. I think Breath of the Wild, despite its relatively shallow combat, doesn't need levels or skill trees or anything like that. Meanwhile, Elden Ring does benefit from it because it's not added fluff, it's part of the core experience.
And crucially, it doesn't have skill trees. And you know what? Let's quickly talk about skill trees.
I made a video already where I talk about this a little bit, but it's on topic here because they seem to have invaded every single AAA open world video game. Assassin's Creed, Elder Scrolls, Horizon Zero Dawn, Horizon Forbidden West, Batman, Spider-Man, Halo Man, War Crimes Man. It's a fucking forest of skill trees. And like I've said in the past, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with skill trees. They do a good job of adding a sense of progression to your character, and especially in an open world game where player freedom is the main appeal, it makes sense to implement a system in which the player is free to choose the ways they become more powerful or whatever. That's all fine.
But a lot of skill trees in these big budget games feel like unnecessary barriers between the player and fun mechanics.
In a game like Insomniac's Spider-Man, for example, there are a lot of combos and abilities and gameplay changes that feel like they should have been a part of your moveset from the beginning, but instead they're locked behind a big skill tree. I think a more organic way to make the player feel like they're becoming more skilled is to provide these abilities right away, but make them feel a bit more difficult to pull off, and maybe don't even tell the player that they're possible until later in the game. That way, if the player discovers these mechanics on their own, they're rewarded for experimentation and curiosity, and when a more experienced player goes back to the beginning of the game, they're able to pull off stuff that they couldn't before, not because of some arbitrary lock, but because they didn't have the skill and knowledge.
That's not to say there's never any reason to withhold new abilities and ways to engage with the game from the player.
The Metroidvania genre is famous for its gameplay loop of exploration and finding upgrades. These also give you a really great sense of progress. They're also more diegetic than a skill tree, since you find these upgrades in the world of the game rather than select them in a menu. That's part of what makes them feel more rewarding than a skill tree, but I think another part of it is that these do feel like rewards rather than something you should have been given from the beginning. Both Elden Ring and Breath of the Wild give you more or less all the tools you need from the outset. Sure, you'll be able to find better armor and weapons as you play, but there are no combos or special moves artificially hidden away behind a transaction in a menu. And that just feels a lot more natural to me. And both games also have their own answers to the more incremental stat boosts that you might find in a skill tree. Breath of the Wild's Spirit Orbs and Korok Seeds make the stat boost feel more tied to the story of the game, similar to Elden Ring's runes, and the leveling system associated with them gives you the same deep customization and progression that you'd find in a TTRPG like Dungeons & Dragons. It makes you feel like this story is yours.
It's good. It's fine. It's numbers. Whatever. Moving on. Before I end this video, there are some little things that I want to quickly go over that didn't really fit into any of the previous sections of this really extraordinarily well-structured video essay, am I right? Up top.
Both of these games have fast travel, meaning once you've made it to certain points on the map, you're free to teleport back to them whenever you want. I think Elden Ring handles this better than Breath of the Wild because in Breath of the Wild you can fast travel out of any precarious situation, which is nice, but sometimes also kills the tension. In Elden Ring, you can fast travel at any time unless you're underground or in the middle of a fight or falling. I think this is the way to go.
Why can't I pause Elden Ring? Let me pause the video game. Thank you. Okay, look, I made a video about this a while back, and there's so much nuance to this discussion that I honestly don't think I was thorough enough back then, and it might be a while before I feel like I can meaningfully add anything to this conversation. For now, I'll just say Elden Ring is pretty far from being as accessible as it should be for a game this big and expensive. I'm not saying it should be easier, but there needed to be more options for people who want to play the game, but are having more trouble with it for one reason or another. I'll link a video or two in the description that goes into this topic in more detail. This kind of falls under accessibility, but I'm going to talk about it separately real quick.
It's simple. Breath of the Wild lets you see all of your quests in one nice menu. Elden Ring does not. Some people have said this makes Elden Ring's quests feel more organic. I disagree. The quests can stay the same, but an optional menu including characters you've met and their dialogue would go a long way. It doesn't even have to mark the quest on your map, because I do think that would go against this game's design. But I don't see how adding an automatically updating journal or quest log would do any harm, especially when a lot of people playing this game are keeping their own physical journals.
This feature would make it easier for people who don't want to do that, but still want to be able to play the game without getting overwhelmed by all of the different side quests.
Previous From Software games have had weapon durability. Elden Ring doesn't. I think this is a good change. Previous Zelda games have not had weapon durability. Breath of the Wild does. I think this is a good change.
I'm a hypocrite.
In all seriousness, Elden Ring's lack of weapon durability works because when you find a weapon you like, it becomes a part of your character in a way, and having to repair that weapon all the time would just be tedious. In Breath of the Wild, weapon durability is nice because it encourages you to experiment and try out every weapon you find without sticking to one. That said, it's not perfect, and I recommend this video on the subject, which has some neat ideas on how to make it better.
Link's in the description. Oh, Link, what are you doing in the description? You're slashing all the words in half with your sword. You're running all over the, rolling into all the... Breath of the Wild lets you climb anything, like Slipknot from Suicide Squad, a movie everybody remembers.
This is honestly a revelation. It's incredibly freeing to be able to Spider-Man up any surface, but importantly, it's not too freeing, since the stamina system ensures that you'll have to be thoughtful about the way you approach every climb. Elden Ring doesn't have climbing, and that does reduce the freedom the player has in its world, but I don't think that's an issue. This restriction adds to the grounded feeling of the game. So not every game needs Zelda's climbing, and I even think that the sequel to Breath of the Wild might benefit from some areas with fewer climbable surfaces. But I do hope more open world games in the future implement features that give players the kind of vertical freedom that Zelda's climbing and gliding provides. And I think we are starting to see that with some of the mechanics in the recently released Horizon Forbidden West, for example. Elden Ring has a lot of really cool and different enemy designs. Breath of the Wild, not so much. What's here is fine, but I think a handful of extra enemy types that aren't just differently colored bokoblins would make the world feel more diverse. I think Zelda could learn a lot from the way that Elden Ring saves some really interesting enemy designs for specific areas. This kind of thing adds to the environmental storytelling of the game and makes you feel like you never really know what's going to be around the next corner. I hope going forward that more open world games are like this.
Breath of the Wild felt like a real, inhalation of fresh air. And then for a while, any cues that developers took from Breath of the Wild felt pretty superficial for the most part, until Elden Ring came around and really felt like the next step for the genre. I think future AAA open world games could learn a lot from these two games, and I think that these two games could learn a lot from each other. Lately, I've had major open world fatigue. I've been getting very tired of these huge game worlds filled with cookie cutter content. But if more of these games draw from the principles of Breath of the Wild and Elden Ring, I think we have a lot to look forward to. I really think we're closer than ever to that ideal interactive experience, that paragon of freedom. And while I no longer personally believe that that hypothetical experience will be the quintessential video game or whatever, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that a lot of developers these days are striving for that kind of achievement. It's a good time to be a gamer, my friends, my gamer friends. I don't know about you, but personally, I'm hoping for some more bandit camps. And that's where the script ends. So I guess this is the part of the video where I say thanks for watching, leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Geez, it's been a while since I've uploaded, huh? I hope to do this more regularly. I hope to put out a consistent stream of content for you to gobble up. What the fuck? If you want updates about my channel and other things, follow me on Twitter. And if you want to watch me stream on Twitch, which I do every now and then, go ahead and follow MegaMindFan on Twitch. I do all sorts of really fun things. Here's a clip. I don't drink very often, but it's that kind of day. Thanks for watching. Here's a quick list of all my patrons. I don't have any patrons. That's the end. Goodbye.